What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of HBCU Huddle. I am CJ, joined alongside, as always, by Mike. Mike, what's going on, man?
Hey, is that you I'm seeing live on the other box right there, man? Are we live
That's me.
with this? That's you.
Yeah, that's me.
Man,
and then I look that way and I see you. What's going on, Mike, baby?
There you go, man. We taking this thing from audio to video, and I'm loving every minute of it, man. As Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew used to say. Remember that song, Loving Every Minute of It?
Yep.
Or was that before your time? That might be before your time.
So it was absolutely before my time, Mike. But that was right in my parents' time. So they were big. My dad enjoyed Dougie Fresh, LL Cool J, Rakim. So he's super excited about that LL Cool J show coming around to the FedEx Forum here in a couple of months. Slick Rick was another one they were big into. So I listened to some of the hip hop from that era. Great generation of hip hop. Honestly.
Oh, that's 80s. 80s love, man.
Yeah.
80s love hip hop era. And right now we're seeing the 50th anniversary of hip hop and all of that going back to the 70s. So the 70s, Sugar Hill Gang, that's when I got involved in it as a 4-year-old. And then going into the 80s, man, with LL, Kool Moe D, that first battle,
Kool Moe D.
Roxanne Shante, who's the real Roxanne, Salt and Pepper, Kid and Play, the House Party movies.
We
Crush
throwing Queen
Groove.
Latifah in there?
Queen Latifah came a little bit later, but she was right on the end of that 80s era right there for sure.
But MC Lyte was in that era.
MC Lyte was right there. If you had a verse in Self-Destruction, you were highlighted in the 80s, right? Yeah. And to this day, man, like I might not be able to do it right now, but there was a time when I can quote Self-Destruction verbatim with every artist that was in there from start to that song to the finish. So that tells you what kind of era I'm in.
Self-Destruction was the East Coast one, and then it was We're All in the Same Gang was the West Coast one. Oh, oh man, you're taking me back, Mike.
Those are the good days, man. That's when hip hop was hip hop. I'm not saying it's not hip hop now, but it's a different genre right now than it was back in that day, bro.
It was something. And listen, before we continue on with this,
this wasn't even scripted.
It was not scripted. We're completely off topic. We are absolutely going to talk about the NFL draft, HBCU players drafted, signed, free agent deals as well. We're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss stand-up comedian Roy Wood Jr. in our Culture Makers segment. But first, since we're already here, where do we go? Where do we leave off at? 50-year anniversary of hip-hop, and it wasn't as commercialized. Once you get the money starting to come in, the people realizing from advertising dollars to people who want to sell and make it more marketable, like, hey, wait a second. We like this. We have to change it up, though, to make it more mainstream. And that's what anything. That's what anything. People are complaining about country music, Nashville country music right now, and it's because there's been more done to these various genres to try and make them more appealing for more of the masses. And I'm with you, Mike. The rawness and I don't want to say realness, because I think there are artists that are real right now in the hip hop world. But it was just so raw, so pure. It hadn't been touched. It hadn't been, for lack of a better phrase, corrupted. And it was different. It was good. I vibe to it as well. And like I said, my parents that was of their era. My parents graduated high school in the mid-'80s, I think, 84, 85, somewhere around there. So hip-hop was big into what they were and who they were. And then me being a child of the 90s, I listened to whatever my parents listened to on the radio, which was a lot of those 80s artists that were hip-hop artists. And then, of course, I come up with the 90s hip-hop and the emergence of Southern rap, with, of course, 8 Ball MJG, 3 6 Mafia, UGK, and Outkast, right? The Dungeon Family, that they were big also, Juvenile, the No Limit. So that's who I came up with. And it's just different right now, man. It's just different. I think for a pick six, an honor, Mike, of it being the 50-year anniversary of hip-hop, for the pick six, I think that we should each pick our 6 favorite early hip-hop artists. Hip-hop artists.
That's easy. That'll definitely be easy, man. And we're doing this, and it was impromptu. We didn't even have this scripted for today's HBCU huddle, but in honor of the LL Cool J tour being announced, and it's coming to FedEx Forum August 22nd, I believe it is. And we will have all kind of announcements leading up to that. This goes right to that, what we're talking about. And and when you talk about that, if you just go to that tour, you might find 2 or 3 of mine.
Oh, absolutely.
From that era all day. But to your point, though, I really saw it explode when Run DMC had their King of Rock album come out, and then Crush Groove came out, and that was the first crossover movie that allowed mainstream viewers to see what hip hop was all about. And then after that, Walk This Way. That is the song, Walk This Way, with Run DMC and Aerosmith, combined rock and rap together, and it exploded from there. And that's when you got the House Party movies, The Kid and Play. That's when you got Breaking. Remember Breaking 1, 2, and 3? Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo. You had the breakdancing artists. You had B Street. You had all of these things. See, that's what I'm saying. I'm a child of this era right here. So, I definitely know how it got started. And then when Dougie Fresh and Slick Rick and the Get Fresh crew came together, man, and they had that little skit, it just took it to a different level, man. And then LL came, and then Latifah and them came after that, Boogie Down. KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions, then NWA, and then it just went global from there. Once it hit West Coast, then it came down south, and then it was just all over the map, man. So all love to hip hop, man. All 50 years strong.
So we are already aging ourselves with all of this 80s hip hop talk. But let's continue to age ourselves. I would go from Nashville or Middle Tennessee, Nashville, Clarksville, up to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Michigan fan, wanted to go up to Michigan. And we would go up there for basketball camps. I did it like 3 times as a kid. So the last time I went, I was 16. And it was just me and my dad. Usually it was me, my dad, my mom, and my brother, or me, my dad, and my brother. But this time, it was just me and my dad. He rented a car, and we drove up there, just he and I together. Well, back in the day, children, you didn't have streaming. You couldn't stream music. So whatever you left the car with is what you listened to. So we usually just leave the car with the radio. So we would just listen to the radio. Unfortunately, radio signals change. They vary, and you lose radio signals. So you could be jamming for 25 minutes on your route just in middle of nowhere America, and then boom, all of a sudden you lose it, and you're struggling to find any signal, let alone a signal that you were comfortable listening to in your car. For us, it was R&B, hip-hop, rap. That was the things we tended to listen to. Now, middle of America, not much there. Middle of nowhere America, nothing is there. So we weren't getting any rap, any hip hop, none of that. We might get some country songs and some old school stations that were playing soft rock or old school rock, but that was pretty much it. We pulled over into a gas station, and at the time, some of the gas stations had CDs that you could buy. And we were looking for I think my dad wanted Red Bull, I wanted some water or something like that, grab some snacks. And right at the front of the counter sat a couple of compilations. One of the compilation CDs was a Best of Run DMC. And thanks to Best of Run DMC, 90s Hip Hop Party, Volume 8, and Best of New Edition, that got us from Indianapolis the rest of the way to Ann Arbor, and then back from Ann Arbor all the way down there. And really listened to some Run DMC. You Be Illin' is my jam. I love You Be Illin'.
Oh yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that was man, Run DMC had a great run, man. Like I can listen to their all-time great hits right now and just play it and let it go all the way through from start to finish and rock with it every single step of the way, man. I even like King of Rock. Like the King of Rock is number one. But even some of their later stuff, man, like when you talk about Daryl Mack, I mean, that guy was a lyrical poet. Run had the emotion. He had the energy. But when DMC came through, he was like, boom, boom, boom. Yep. Like he just had to bounce with him and the lyrics, man. And it was like, man, I tell you what, I've been to thousands of sporting events. I've been around thousands of celebrities throughout, people I grew up idolizing, people that are current, all of these things. I remember being at the 2010 All-Star game in Dallas, NBA All-Star game. And it was myself, and right now this guy, one of my better friends in the industry, BJ, he's actually the vice president of the Cleveland Cavaliers media relations department. But we go way back to when he was at North Carolina A&T and I was covering FAMU. Like we were in the MEAC years ago. And so we're in there in the practice. He's in there working for one of the teams. At the time, I think he was working with the Charlotte Hornets. So whoever Charlotte was represented by at that time during an all-star practice, he was in there to watch them. And then in walks Ludacris, and a couple of minutes later in walks DMC from Run DMC. Mm-hmm. And he and I looked at each other, and you could have swore we were looking at like the Pope when DMC walked in. Because he still looked like DMC. You know what I'm saying? He still had the wide rim glasses, and he didn't have the hat on at the time. But we were like, man, this dude is – so, I mean, think about it. Like, Barry Bonds was at that All-Star game. I want to say Prince was there at the time too. I mean, it was like all kind of major in their prime celebrities there. DMC just walks in unceremoniously, and he and I are looking at each other like two school-age girls because we so hyped that it's DMC from Run DMC, man. So that gives you the kind of love that we have for DMC and Run DMC and what they meant to the industry for sure.
Some people have grown up, some of our younger listeners have grown up with rap and hip-hop being in existence. When I grew up, it had just gotten a solid foothold. It wasn't until the early 90s, like 92, 93, maybe even 94, maybe even mid-90s, before it was recognized, and hip-hop was recognized by the Grammys as an actual music category. And Mike, you grew up in a time where growing up, like rap wasn't around like that. So for people who are younger than us to sit here and listen, it must throw them for a loop. It's like, oh, rap's always been around. Rap is one of the same, rap's a consistent genre. It's just like rock. No, it hadn't always been the case, man. It just hasn't. And I remember all the documentaries I watched that were talking about at the time in the 90s, the birth of hip-hop and what allowed hip-hop to explode, much like Michael did in the NBA, where there were stars before Michael, but boom, when Michael Jordan comes through, that's something else different entirely. You are right, Mike, when you say that Walk This Way took rap to a different level, brought it mainstream, almost legitimized it in a way that was beneficial monetarily to the genre. So one of these days, we got plenty of shows to do. We'll closer to the LL Cool J show. Why not? We'll take a look back to honor the 50-year anniversary of the birth of hip hop. We'll take a look back at some of our favorite hip hop artists from the very, very beginning. That's great. Did not expect to get on that, Mike. That's why we do this. You never know where we're going to go. Where we're going right now, though, is to the NFL draft. Isaiah Bolden, out of Jackson State, cornerback / return man out of Jackson State. He was drafted this year in this year's NFL draft. He is Jackson State's 43rd pick as an FCS. They're wondering first pick overall, but since the split happened between D1 AA and D1 single A, which later became FBS FCS, he is Jackson State's 43rd pick. That is the most all-time amongst all FCS programs in the nation. Mike, when you saw that pick happen, first off, when you saw that pick happen or got news of that pick, what do you think the Patriots are getting in Isaiah Bolden?
A guy that's going to, day one in minicamp, do everything it takes to make the team. A guy that's certainly willing to make his name on special teams and in a special teams unit on punt coverage, kickoff coverage, punt return, and kick return. If he's not given the opportunity to field punts and field kickoffs and show you what he can do, then that's something wrong in that situation. Now, in the NFL level, it sort of mitigates the strength of a strong kick returner because most of the times they're kicking off and the ball is going so deep into the end zone where you're just better off taking a knee and getting the ball at the 25-yard line. But in the punt coverage game, in the punt game, this is where, this young man can really, really make a name for himself because he's versatile, he's fast, he's done it at all levels. People forget, like he's coming out of Jackson State now, but he started his career at Florida State. Where he played in 13 games a couple years ago, or 12 games a couple years ago. So he's been at the elite level. He was recruited at the elite level, and he's giving you one of those guys that can do a little bit of everything. I think he led the nation or led FCS in kickoff or return coverage, and I think there were 6 kicks that he took 50-plus yards at some point last season. So when you add all of those things up, man, this is a young man that has the speed, has the skill, to do everything he needs to do at the next level to give himself a real chance to make an NFL roster. And as a 7th-round pick, there's no guarantees when it comes to that. We have a lot of guys, a handful of guys that have signed as undrafted free agents, and we'll get to them. But for him to be the only guy taken in the draft and hear his name drafted, I was shocked that it took that long to get to the 7th round. But I think there's going to be a handful of guys beyond him and him as well, who's going to make a name for themselves and stick in the NFL.
Absolutely. Last week, we talked about some of the best HBCU players drafted post-2002. One of them, Jacoby Jones, was a return specialist. Jacoby played receiver and was able to take the tops off of defenses, but he was mostly used as a return specialist. And there is a place for that even in today's NFL where you get the extra 5 yards on a touchback, and the way the people are kicking the ball through the end zone is better just to catch the ball, take a knee like you're saying. However, with somebody that is this fast, with somebody in Bolden who has this type of return ability, he allows you an extra sort of weapon in the kickoff game. And we saw him here 2 times here at the what am I blanking on the Southern Heritage Classic's name? At the Southern Heritage Classic, saw him twice in 2021 and last year come through and take kicks back for 40-plus yards. Now, they didn't get all the way to the house, but they flipped the field in favor of Jackson State. And if you have somebody like Isaiah Bolden who can do that, who is a threat to score on a kickoff return or a threat to get you an extra 10 to 15 yards. So instead of starting at the 25, you're starting at the 35 or the 40. That's huge for you in the field position battle that is the NFL.
And then when you add in the fact that, can he be in your secondary? Can he be a dime package defensive back? Can he be a guy that you can, maybe shift positions? When you're playing special teams, you're willing to do anything. You got to be able to run, catch, tackle, a lot of things. So where he lines up at is going to be interesting in terms of what position and what meeting room he's going to be in. But I think he has the versatility to almost give you – he was basically the poor man's Travis Hunter on that team. He could have done everything that Travis Hunter did, but Travis Hunter had the marquee freshman name coming in and all the hype and the hoopla. And now Travis is over at Colorado with Deion, whereas, Bolden is now in the NFL. So I think he has a chance to stick. I'm definitely going to be looking for him to do so. And we know going to New England, going to that Bill Belichick mindset, he uses guys in multiple ways if they're willing to be versatile and willing to work. And this sounds like a kid who's going to be willing to work for sure.
Like I said earlier, this pick is pick number 43 for Jackson State, which is the most by a long shot, by a wide margin of any FCS program all time. If we can throw that graphic up and take a look here, you'll see Jackson State 43. Mike, who's number 2? Do you see that? It's those G-men, baby.
I see
36,
that.
South Carolina State, 33, Tennessee State, 33, tied for third apiece, and then Northwestern State there at 5th. So 4 of the top 5 most drafted FCS prospects are HBCUs. Then you keep going further. You see Southern there in the top 10 at 6. And then you look around and you will see North Carolina A&T in the top 15. You will see Alcorn State in the top 15. You see FAMU right there in the top 15, top 10 as well. Mike, what does this say when you look at this and see all of the talent at the FCS level going on to play at the NFL level from HBCUs? What do you think that says about the quality of play at the HBCU level?
Well, you knew that early on, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, those numbers were really, really big time there from HBCUs because we didn't have a lot of African-American players, even playing at some of the more mainstream institutions, whether it was at the high level or the Division I AA at the time and FCS level, which it is known as now. So a lot of that Grambling number was from Eddie Robinson's coaching era. A lot of that Jackson State number was from W.C. Gordon era and all of these other guys that have come along the way. And now what you're seeing is those other institutions that are not HBCUs put a lot of African-American players in the NFL as well, too. So there is talent to be found at that level. And I think that says it more than anything else. No matter where you go to college, there's going to be film there of you. There's going to be cameras in the sky looking at your tape. And then you have a chance, even after those seasons are over, to go to the combines and go to the pro days and to go to the workouts where you can continue to build that resume. And HBCUs have done it in a spectacular way. And it also speaks to the relationships of the coaches there, too. because we're talking about coaching icons and legends at the Alcorns, the Grambling, the Jackson States, the Tuskegees, the North Carolina A&Ts, all of those, the Tennessee States, all of these schools have produced guys who have played in the NFL, coached in the NFL, and certainly have served as ambassadors to keep that pipeline open.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, there was only, on the topic of keeping the pipeline open, Mike, unfortunately, there was only one HBCU player drafted. There's a pretty good article by Gerald Thomas in the Tallahassee Democrat about this, and it got me to thinking, got me to wondering, well, are HBCUs being undervalued, as is the case most of the time? And in this one, I'm not sure if I have a definitive answer. I know this. There were only 10 FCS players drafted in this year's draft, the lowest such mark since the pandemic in 2020, when only 6 were taken, 5 were taken in 2021. Over the past, since 2014, we'll take a look at the number of FCS players drafted since 2014. You got 19 in 2014, 17 and 15, 20 and 16, 15 and 17, 2018 saw 19, 2019 saw 13. Then you go 6, 5, 20 in 2022, and then 10 in 2023. Looking over that same time period, looking at the number of HBCU players drafted, it moves much the way that the FCS numbers look. In 2014, 2, 2015, 4, 3 and 16 and 17, only 2 players taken. In 2018, 4 in 2019, none in 2020, none in 21, 3 in 22, 1 in 2023. Mike, when you look at those numbers over the last decade, do you think that it is a NFL scouting issue where they not looking at or looking down on HBCU talent rather, or is it just they're only looking at the Power 5 schools when you think about SEC, Big Ten, and the rest of that group?
I think it's 2 things. It's twofold, CJ. I think number one, it's safer when you're a scouting department and you can say, hey, I want to get this mid-level type prospect out of Alabama. Because you're assuming because he was at Alabama, he's got the best coaching, best facilities, and he had to play behind X, Y, and Z 5-star players. And, we can continue his development at this level. So some of that is because of reputation. And you feel like, hey, if I'm going to buy stock, I'm going to buy stock in a company that's been around a while, that's known, that we've seen their mainstream history for a long time. And sometimes when you're drafting below that level, you just don't know. Why did a prospect start off at a smaller school? Why did he stay there? I think those numbers for HBCUs are going to tick up in a ways because of the transfer portal. And I think, the transfer portal will end up sending a lot of Power 5 talent back down to HBCUs in massive numbers. So you're going to have guys that are going to be able to get out and get into the draft and get into these spaces. Yes, transfers have always been able to come to HBCUs, but I think now that you have the transfer portal that makes free agency out of college football, I think you're going to see some of those numbers uptick from that standpoint. But it's also because now they might stay down on the other side of it because you also have so many different leagues that these players can go to, XFL, USFL. So those might be the training grounds that they get to before they get an NFL contract. Through free agency as opposed to going into the NFL through draft. So you have a pipeline now with 2 other pro and semi-pro leagues that are out there to help you sort of make that leap into the NFL going a different route.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will say that I was surprised by the fact only 10 players from the FCS were drafted in this draft. There's talent at that level, and I was surprised that only one HBCU player was taken, but that Isaiah Bolden was the one taken. We did a whole show on my pick 6 where I listed the 6 most likely prospects to be drafted. And Bolden wasn't on there. I think we mentioned him honorable mention, but he was not on there. But the players that were on there, they did find homes. There were a lot of free agency news. Mike, did any of that stand out to you?
Oh, yes. Our guy Farmer, the second, from Lane, made it through. Isaiah Land ended up signing a deal with the Dallas Cowboys. Remember, it was the Cowboys who signed his FAMU teammate a couple seasons ago, coming out of that same defensive front that FAMU was put. So they put back-to-back guys with the Dallas Cowboys to try to give them a chance to get out there. Aubrey Miller Jr. Had a chance to sign a free agent deal too. It escapes me what team he ended up with, but I know he did sign a free agent deal as well, coming out of Jackson State. And then, the offensive lineman from UAPB, who we both had in that top 6 that we thought was going to be able to get his name called. He didn't have his name called, but he was one of the first undrafted free agents off the board to go into the New Orleans Saints. So, you had a couple of different guys, a couple of different names that stood out and were able to, make deals so that they can get to training camps in a preferred sort of training camp environment. And we'll see where they go here from minicamp. But, I do think we're going to end up seeing or hearing about some of these guys in games next year in terms of making a name for themselves, the same way we heard about guys jumping out of the mix. The defensive lineman from Detroit, who we talked about, James Houston out of Jackson State. This was a guy that he didn't have a clear path into the league through the draft, but once he got signed and got into a camp and was able to make some noise, look at what he was able to do for himself there too. So none of these guys went the Darius or Shaq Leonard route that we talked about last week, being drafted highly and securely into the draft. But you certainly can still make a name for yourself, and you can still certainly make a roster and then get into a game, and then you'll see what happens from there.
Aubrey Miller Jr. signed with the Dolphins. Andrew Farmer with the Chargers. Good luck to all of the HBCU players drafted. And all of the HBCU players drafted, the one HBCU player drafted, and all of those who signed as rookie free agents. Look forward to seeing what you do on Sundays coming out here going forward. Last bit of news, Mike, our Culture Makers segment. I put Roy Wood Jr. up here in our Culture Makers segment. Roy Wood Jr., for those of you who don't know, is a Daily Show correspondent right now. FAMU alum, hosted the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. He did a great job. I love Roy Wood Jr. He tells some of the best stories. Father Figures, one of my favorite stand-up specials of the past, I think about 5 years or so. This Is Not Happening. He served as a host and told some stories on This Is Not Happening. There's a great story that he tells about Uncle Luke there, also about his time working as a busboy at a Golden Corral. It's all great. He is one of the funniest comedians out there from Birmingham. He got his start in Birmingham radio, working as one of the personalities in the mornings, and he just ballooned from there, took off on NBC's Last Comic Standing and all of that. I love Roy Wood Jr. He tells some of the best jokes, and he got to do it in front of the president and vice president, take some of that HBCU flavor to the White House. I love it.
And you got to love it, man, because there's HBCU flavor in the White House right now with Kamala Harris being the vice president. So, to see Roy Wood elevate to that level, to get this kind of assignment speaks volume, man. And, he's come from that Ricky Smiley tree, too. Ricky Smiley's out of Alabama, that Birmingham area. Ricky Smiley was here in Memphis earlier this month doing the show as well, too. But, I am familiar with Roy Wood Jr. I've seen a couple of his stand-ups. He is a funny guy. He didn't hold any punches back when it came to joking about Biden. And, that's what you got to do, man. When you get that kind of stage, you definitely have to live up to it. Kudos to him for being a culture maker on HBCU Huddle, the video version of the HBCU Huddle.
The video version is over with. Thank you guys for watching us and listening to us. We still love you if you're only listening to us. We love it. We'll talk to you again next week. For Mike, I am CJ. Everybody take care.